The Loyalty Leaders Podcast is brought to you by Loyalty Summit, coming up in Chicago on September 10th and 11th, 2025. Loyalty Summit brings together high-powered travel industry executives and influential loyalty leaders from around the globe. Join us in Chicago for senior-level discussions and networking. For more information, visit loyaltysummit.com. Welcome to episode 62 of the Loyalty Leaders Podcast. On episode 62 of the Loyalty Leaders Podcast, David Feldman and Nik Laming discuss the upcoming Loyalty Summit Asia Pacific, highlighting the regional differences in loyalty programs compared to the Americas and Europe. They explore the balance between transactional and emotional loyalty, the impact of technology on loyalty programs, and the concept of lifestyle programs.
Welcome back to Loyalty Leaders Podcast. I'm David Feldman, Chair of Loyalty Summit, and I'm joined today by Nik Laming, who should not be a stranger to any of you. But Nik is also one of our co-chairs, along with Phil Rubin, for our upcoming inaugural Loyalty Summit Asia Pacific, which is going to be held in Hong Kong on November 19. Of course, we also have another Loyalty Summit coming up, Loyalty Summit Americas in Chicago on September 10 and 11. But for a long time, Nik, everybody's been asking us to hold a Loyalty Summit in Asia Pacific, and logistics-wise has presented some challenges for a couple of years, but we have it organized this year. And November 19 will be our inaugural one-day Loyalty Summit in Asia Pacific. Now, Nik, when we talk about Asia Pacific, obviously we have Loyalty Summit in Americas, we have a Loyalty Summit in Europe, which is typically in London. You know, even between those two events, which we've held since, both events since 2018, in fact, there are a lot of regional differences in programs, in the discussions that we hold, in the insights into consumer behavior in loyalty programs. Loaded question for you. You spent a lot of time working in Asia Pacific with loyalty programs and running loyalty programs down there. Let's make the presumption that loyalty programs in Asia Pacific have regional differences as well, compared to Europe, compared to Americas. How do they differ? Can you the top things off the top of your head that you've encountered?
I think there's a number of differences. Firstly, let me just say I'm really excited that we're bringing Loyalty Summit to Asia Pacific. For once, I'm not going to be one of the guys who's travelled the furthest to get there, and it will really give the opportunity for some of the people around the region to come and swap stories with others from around the world. So I think it's a great opportunity for people and the APAC region. So yeah, but to answer your question, we have such a diverse set of marketplaces. Asia Pacific is far from a standard zone, right? You've got China, you've got India, you've got Japan, Korea, Southeast Asia, you've got Australia, New Zealand, and then a whole host of different cultures and business practices within. So from a loyalty perspective, we've definitely seen some different trends and going in some different directions. I think there are a lot of large family businesses in the Asia region. So you get a lot of conglomerates, and a lot of those conglomerates have looked at themselves and said, well, how can we use data better across all of our organization? How can we tie these disparate businesses together? Often the answer has been, well, let's create a loyalty program, a loyalty entity that does data and digital, that we can incubate digital businesses and really build out something that's been a hard model to surface in the US. But that coalition, the elusive coalition program, we've seen a lot of those in Asia driven by these big conglomerates, and they've been very successful in a lot of cases. We've also seen, I think, a very fit and able and survivor type loyalty program models, in that in the US you have this wonderful, especially for the airlines, they have this wonderful credit card engine that funds and drives a lot of the activities. But when you go to Asia, you've got a mixed bag, or Asia Pacific, you've got a mixed bag of regulated interchange. And where you don't have regulated interchange, you may have small credit card markets, and neobanks and digital banks with different models and QR codes, and so there's no such thing as a loyalty comfort zone in Asia Pac, and we've seen a host of different models born out of that. So I think it's stress put on the system that's caused innovation and driven innovation. So I hope that we can surface some of that and see some of that in action in the agenda.
It's interesting you put it that way because that co-brand cards, is and bank partnership relationships is a big difference even between Americas and Europe. In our Lodi summits, and Europe does have the major airlines in Europe do have co-brand cards, and they are quite lucrative, and they bring in millions and millions of dollars over there as well. And they do exist in Asia Pacific, and they also bring in millions and millions of dollars, and they're not a new invention. When you look at the legacy airlines, in Asia Pacific, Cathay Pacific, Singapore Airlines, Qantas, in New Zealand. These legacy airlines have had co-brand financial relationships for decades now. But I think you're right. I think what needs calling out is the scale is completely different to the US, and it's interesting the way you frame it in terms of comfort zone. I mean, I think that one of the things that we have that comes through in the conversations with both with ourselves with writing loyalty programs or with clients or at Loyalty Summit itself, particularly in Americas, is that the sheer volume and magnitude of co-brand card revenue in the United States, it doesn't just provide a comfort zone for loyalty programs, but it actually distracts from loyalty programs as well. I mean, we've had an immediate past, CEO of the world's largest airline who constantly referred to the program as the card program because that's all he saw it as was a credit card program. Couldn't see the forest through the trees in terms of actually it's a loyalty program that that is driven by changes in consumer behavior, and those changes in consumer behavior impact the bottom line, both on the core airline product and on co-brand card revenue. So, it's a little bit of a mixed bag. In Asia Pacific, you certainly don't have those distractions, as you say, but you also miss out on that comfort zone, which is interesting. Phil Rubin and yourself have done a tremendous job in starting to put together the agenda for the event in Hong Kong. And I know we're going to be going live with that very, very soon on the website. LoyaltySummit.com is the place to keep an eye out for that, folks. Some interesting discussion points are sort of coming through. These are very popular topics, trending topics in Asia Pacific at the moment in the conversations we have with regard to loyalty. One of the things that comes through is transactional versus experiential, and we've been talking about this across regions for years now. It's a bit of a buzzword. The big consultants love banding this around. It's generally speaking, it's kind of meaningless because it's been bandied around so much. But when we talk about transactional versus experiential, can you give us a bit of an illustration about what does that actually mean to folks? When people look at it, go, "This is look like buzzword bingo," but what does it actually mean?
Yeah, and to be honest, I think that there is a lot of that. I think buzzword bingo is quite a good way to sum it up. And what it comes down to in reality is it comes right back in my mind to this whole that we're trying to tap into human nature, and there's two sides to the brain. There's a rational side and there's an emotional side, and with loyalty programs, I think what we're trying to do is stimulate both, in that we're trying to come up with a rational, transactional type of relationship. And some programs stop there. And I think when we've got cashback programs coming in and there's this desire for instant gratification, they're becoming more and more transactional. But where the real magic happens for me in loyalty programs is where, yes, you have that transactional, but you've also got some emotional ties to people, and you are creating experiences that they really value. And again, airlines have been doing it for years with the lounge and the red carpet and the laying out these wonderful benefits for their high value travelers. And what does that look like if you're a supermarket or a retailer or a bank or an insurance company? How does that translate? And is it valid? Is it desirable to have an emotional relationship with one of those brands? And how do you best accomplish it? And can you do that with a loyalty program? So I think there are a lot of probably more questions than we have answers there. But what I would say is that the best loyalty programs have a blend of both transactional and experiential or sort of emotional benefits that really drive behavior on a long-term basis. And it brings us on to another point in that the economics behind these programs, if it's purely transactional and rational, is it sustainable or is it a race to the bottom? Because in the cashback model in particular, on a credit card, when you look around, you're getting 0.4% or 0.2% back on your spend. And in some of the Asia markets, I've done the analysis with prepaid cards and debit cards, and you're celebrating a sort of 0.4% generosity going back to the customer. And then you realize that their average spend is $100 a month. And you think, that's actually not that great. The reward at the end of 3 years when we expire their points is not going to be enough to get them excited about anything. So
A dollar $1.20 equivalent over 3 years isn't exciting to you, Nick?
your maths is better than mine, but nonetheless, it's pretty meaningless.
Yeah.
But if that $1.20 is translated into a really valuable benefit of some sort that isn't easy to replicate, and that could be status, it could be access, it could be some exclusivity, then that becomes a much greater payback. So if you can get that model right, where you've got both sides of the equation, then I think you can deliver sustainable loyalty, even in the face of more challenging economics with interchange for credit cards being cut and this cycle that we go through where loyalty programs have the value ripped out of them year after year until customers give up. And then someone comes in and revamps them, refreshes them, relaunches them in a slightly different guise, and then we're back in business. So how can we deliver a loyalty program whilst satisfying the CFO? I think that's going to be another topic that we cover, and it wouldn't be a loyalty conference without a good discussion on technology. We're seeing a lot of our industry, I wouldn't say revolutionized, but I would say supercharged in some respects by new technology coming through. And we've even, dare I say it, seen some applications of things like blockchain that are starting to make sense. I've
Finally,
always said
finally.
that that if you don't have to mention the word blockchain and it still makes sense, then you could be onto something.
Yeah,
And
yeah, that's a good philosophy. That's a good
yeah,
philosophy.
because it's not about the technology, but the application of it
Yeah.
is starting to make sense. So I'm sure we're going to have some pretty good discussions on that. And then coming right back to the fact that we've got all these conglomerates and we've got lifestyle programs coming in for airlines. And
Let me jump in there because I'm glad you mentioned lifestyle programs. I can have a
yeah,
question about that, but just going back to the experiential, as you were talking, what occurs to me is part of the reason that this turns into buzzword bingo is because experiential is a horrible word that the big consultants came up with for transactional versus experiential. It's not about that. It's transactional versus emotional. Or
yeah,
as I've always liked to describe it, it's behavioral versus attitudinal loyalty. Your behavioral loyalty is your transactional loyalty. It's your discounts, your cashback. It's the if you buy this, I'll give you X points, and then you can redeem these X points for whatever, or I'm going to give you some kind of rebate or cashback or discount, which of course horrible, whatever. But nonetheless, that's the transactional behavioral side. Basically, I want you to do X behavior. I will dangle Y carrot in front of you for you to do it. But on the other
yeah,
side, we have the emotional, the attitudinal, and that is like you say, oh my goodness, this lounge is fantastic. They gave me an upgrade, or something went wrong, and you know what? They looked after me. Or it's the I was able to actually redeem my points for a first class vacation for my family, for which I would never in a million years either be willing to, be able to, or be prepared to, spend cash to do so. Therefore, I am actually able to have an experience that was only possible due to the loyalty program. So I think yes, there's a I use the word experience there, but I think the coin of the term experiential when we're talking about transactional experiential, I think that's the bane of the problem. is because it's a bad selection of words. We're really talking about emotional loyalty, attitudinal loyalty, and they sort of, in most cases, they go together. Unless you're a very specialized loyalty program, you kind of can't have one without the other. Transactional without the emotional is just going to be a cost center. And very few brands, although there are some exceptions, can do just the emotional without some form of transactional involved. In 95% of cases, there are some exceptions, as we know. I mean, an easy way to think about it is your traditional legacy frequent flyer program kind of is two programs in one. It is a transactional program, although can provide outsized value, which gives some emotional lift and all the rest of it. And then you have a benefits program, which traditionally is not really transaction related at all, but is all about the emotional, the attitudinal side. But there sort of is some transactional qualification and things like that involved. So there is a little bit. There's a gray area. The delineation between the two is murky, but typically, 9 out of 10 loyalty programs are going to want some mix of those two strategies and approach. So I'm glad you sort of mentioned that. Now, lifestyle. You mentioned lifestyle, and let's talk about let's go back to the opening question, sort of the difference when we think about regional differences with Asia Pacific. We hear a lot about lifestyle programs. Again, a buzzword. Maybe it's not the right word to use. Maybe it's confusing or meaningless to people. But in Asia Pacific, when we talk about lifestyle programs, as a program manager, what does that mean to you? And how do you explain that to the C suite, for example, when they pose the same question to you that I just did?
Yeah, I think that it was actually a solution to a pretty significant problem that we had, which was we were at Cebu Pacific, low cost carrier. Infrequent leisure traffic was probably 90 something percent of our customer base. So, how do you run a meaningful loyalty program that is going to be attractive to more than 5% of the base? Because if it's only 5% of the base, then why are you doing it? So we had a real challenge. And the way that we chose to address that challenge was by trying to increase our share of life. In that, what we wanted to do was get involved in our customers' lives in more areas than just the one time that they were going to fly in a year. So they would be using our loyalty program every day if we could possibly get them to that, and engaging them in either an app or some form of like a digital pass or some form of program at the point of sale that we could get them to interact with us and get bigger rewards. Because again, coming back to our $1.20 over 3 years, that's not very exciting. So what you needed to do is get together with some other brands that have either maybe more utility, so you're in there more regularly, you're spending more money with them, and when you start to bring these different partners together with different super skills, then you can really build a program that's appealing to people with a particular lifestyle. It's a fairly cheesy way of describing it, but yeah, that was what we were trying to do. We were trying to get a bigger share of life.
And that kind of leads me to another topic again, but it's related. And really, the mechanism to do that is through partnerships predominantly, right?
Yeah,
So,
that's the only way.
so another buzzword, coalition programs. Because again, that's kind of a loaded word. I hate using it because it's a loaded word. Again, brings up the wrong. People have these preconceptions in their mind, but really, outside of the United States, this is not lifestyle program might be a newish term, or updated terminology for what's existed for a long time, particularly in legacy markets. I'm thinking Southeast Asia. I'm thinking Europe, both continental and in the UK. I'm thinking Canada. I'm thinking South America. I'm thinking Australia. I'm thinking New Zealand. Basically, anywhere that's not the United States and has legacy loyalty programs. Generally speaking, South Africa. All of these regions have decades of experience in having such breadth and depth of partnerships on the ground that really, you use the term lifestyle. I've traditionally used the word, every day, whether it's everyday earn and burn, or it doesn't, but that's not just earn and burn,
Yep.
it's benefits. But the idea being that from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed, maybe not every single interaction you have during the day, but a plethora of interactions you have during the day, which have nothing to do with going to the airport, or staying in a hotel, can be involved in earning points, redeeming points, or enjoying benefits courtesy of your involvement in the program. So perhaps the new terminology of lifestyle is just a way to encapsulate all of that. Do you think that's a fair description?
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing is because we ended up our tagline for the program, it evolved, and by I think it was about year 4, we were get go every day, because we had to kind of grow into that proposition. When we only had a few partners, it's very hard to be in someone's life every day. But yeah, we did turn into that. And I think the reason, again, that we've seen these programs growing has been stress on the system. And I
Mm-hmm.
just don't think there's been that stress on the system in the US. So when I first moved to the Philippines, I thought, well, I'll just set up a co-brand card and play golf. But it didn't work out that way because there was too
You
much
still got to
stress in
play
the
golf, but
system.
you have to work a lot harder for
Yeah,
it.
on occasion. Yeah. Um, and so we were forced to go out and do these partner deals. Doing partner deals is not that nice because coalition programs, despite what you may think, these partners, it's a bit like herding cats. They've got different objectives. They've got different needs. You're often dealing with frenemies who are trying to do exactly the same thing as you. So it's like a strange dance where you're saying, yeah, we'd love to do business with you, and it's going to be a great partnership, and we want to build our database too. But really, you're competing like cat and dog behind the
Mm-hmm.
scenes. So yeah, coalition, I think, generally don't work. Where they work is where you've got a dominant party, often an airline or a grocer, and they say, we've got this program, it's really good, it's really valuable, and
And everyone else is really just a partner of their program, is really what you're talking about. So the word
yeah,
coalition
they're a
probably,
beneficiary.
yeah, it's really a partnership network, not a coalition network, because ultimately,
100%. Yeah,
especially nowadays,
yeah,
yeah, I think in the 90s it might have been a different story. But again, the barrier to entry was a lot harder then as well, particularly
yeah.
from a data management perspective or technology perspective. Nick, we have covered a huge breadth. I know that you and Phil Rubin are hard at work putting the finishing touches on the agenda for Hong Kong, November 19th. Stay tuned, LodySummit.com. Also, Chicago for Lodi Summit Americas, September 10th and 11th. Again, LodySummit.com. Stay tuned. Tickets are available for Chicago. That is live now. And that agenda is constantly being refined and updated, but it is up on the website now. Nick, I'm sure we're going to talk to Phil and yourself again in more detail about Hong Kong. It's exciting that we're finally launching Lordy Summit Asia Pacific. Looking forward to it. Thanks for joining. Thanks for discussing.
Thanks, Dan. Speak soon.
Thanks for joining us on the Loyalty Leaders Podcast. Join us for the next episode every Tuesday.